Good evening, and welcome to Representative Kristine Reeves' virtual town hall. You may submit your live questions or via the comment section now. So feel free to put your question in the comment section for this live virtual town hall. Before we begin answering questions, I'd like to just open up the floor for some opening remarks. Rep. Reeves, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Megan. And thanks to everybody out there joining us virtually this evening to hear both from you all what matters most to you and your families, but to share a little bit about what's been going on in the 2026 legislative session and to learn more about how the work that we are doing in Olympia directly impacts you. For those of you that I may not know, or this might be your first time joining us for a town hall or getting to know me, I did want to share just a little bit of background on who I am, the work that I'm doing in Olympia on your behalf, and then open it up to your questions. So I'll just start really quickly. If we've not met, what may be important for you to know is that I'm a Federal Way resident. I'm a mom of 2 young kids in our public school system here in Federal Way. My husband's a pilot for Alaska Airlines, and I'm a lifelong Washingtonian. I grew up actually in Eastern Washington, the daughter of a single mom who struggled with substance use disorder. So I spent about the first 10 years of my life in and out of foster homes. In my teens, when my mom relapsed into her substance use, I ended up homeless. And I often tell people that it was because of public school educators that I am here today. I feel like they saved my life. And so getting the opportunity to provide public service is really centered on our work around fully and fairly funding our K through 12 system. But because I'm a mom, I also care a lot about making sure that folks can get to and from work and have a safe place to put their kids every day. So I have fought pretty hard on accessible, affordable childcare issues. I spent several years working for U.S. Senator Patty Murray and Governor Inslee in the state of Washington on behalf of our military families and veterans. So you'll see me continue to do that work here in Olympia. And then I'm an economic developer by trade and do organizational psychology work. I care a lot about how the systems we operate in work best for everyone. And that's why I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, where we work on environmental sustainability, ensuring that our farmers can continue to feed us and provide food security for every Washingtonian. I also serve on the Consumer Protection and Business Committee. That's where we work to make sure that our consumers are best protected, but that our businesses are well regulated in a way that enables them to contribute to our economy. I also serve on the House Education Committee, the K through 12 committee, focused on how we get to the full, fair, and equitable funding of our K through 12 system through strong public policy that supports our kids, our educators, and our communities. I work on a variety of other committees, but I'll share I serve as the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus. It's the largest Black caucus in the Western United States with 14 members, working on behalf of all communities across the state of Washington to advance equitable public policy. And I'm here tonight because the most important thing for me in public service is making sure that I hear from the people that I serve, and I'm doing the work on your behalf that best meets you and your family's needs. So I look forward to answering your questions, and let's jump into it, Megan.
Great. Thank you so much. We're going to get started tonight with some of the pre-submitted questions, starting with a question from Craig. So Craig asks, what are you doing to lower taxes and stop the out-of-control spending in Olympia?
Yeah, Craig, thanks for that question. And I think this is something that I hear from, working families across our district, which is how are we making sure that the taxes that you are providing to the government are working best for them? And what I can tell you is we're in a really strange time, Craig. For the first time in a long time, if at all, the 25% of our budget in the state that relies on your federal taxes coming back to the state of Washington isn't happening. We have a federal administration that has made several decisions to cut funding to the state of Washington, including programs like food programs through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, SNAP and WIC funding that benefits our kids in childcares and public schools. And so the work ahead isn't just how do we regulate the spending for Washington, but how do we make sure that we're not leaving people in a lurch because the federal government isn't returning your tax dollars to you the way that we've previously expected them to. And that includes things like K through 12 education. If folks, are implementing DEI policies, we've had the federal administration make threats against that. So, Craig, the work ahead is how do we make that balance work? How do we help create affordability in Washington state while recognizing that we are living in unprecedented times when your tax dollars at the federal level aren't being returned to you the way they have in the past. And so I'm going to keep focusing on how do we get to that affordability and making sure that we keep our commitment to you as the taxpayer and to the public. But it's a big challenge for us right now, and we're going to keep working at it. So thanks for that question.
Great. Thank you so much for your response, Rep. Reeves. We're now going to go to a live question from Stephen Curry. You should now see it on your screen, but what are the most important issues to address in the new strategic plan for emergency food systems? Thank you for being such a wonderful advocate for food banks.
Thanks, Stephen. That's kind of you. Well, as you know, we have been championing efforts here in Olympia across several different bills, but particularly across House Bill 2238, which is asking the state to direct our State Department of Agriculture to build and develop a statewide food security strategy. We learned after COVID that we have multiple agencies working on food security policy that isn't necessarily connected, aligned, or advancing a statewide strategy. So what's most important in that strategic plan for those emergency food systems is that we are able to get shore up our farming system. As you may know, Stephen, 3,700 farms have closed in the state of Washington in the last 5 years. That means farmers aren't able to get food to market. And when that happens, that means we're not driving down the cost of groceries because supply and demand aren't meeting. It means that we're not able to get fresh produce into our farmers markets or our food banks. And so part of this strategic plan is really about how do we help look across the entire food system and build a security plan that feeds every Washingtonian. And I'm really proud of the work that our advocates, our community, we've had over 160 plus different advocacy organizations and partners working with us to make sure that we get this policy right. And just appreciate your leadership on that and your participation and interest in that work.
Great. Thank you so much, Rep. Reeves. We're now going to go to a live question from Ashley. Ashley says, we know early learning is directly tied to long-term outcomes in education, workforce stability, and child well-being. In this session, what specific actions will you take to ensure early learning and childcare remain priorities?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Ashley. And this is a topic near and dear to me. Again, as I said, I'm a mom who, walked into a child care center twice a day, 5 days a week. With my kids, and I paid more than my mortgage and my car payment combined for childcare. The work we have to do ahead, and the work that I've been doing in Olympia this year, is to protect the gains that we have made in advancing our effort to get to universal childcare. So one of the most specific things, the action that I took this year, is that when the Senate budget came out, the governor's budget came out and defunded Working Connections childcare, my effort was to partner with several of my House colleagues and submit a letter to the budget writers to really articulate displeasure around that defunding. And because of that, we were able to get the House version of the budget funded at a higher level and, to really try to address the wait list issue. And I know that's kind of very technical. I'm guessing that you might be in the background on some of these policies. So, the work ahead, though, is making sure that as we consider any new revenue, my focus is on how do we make sure that that's creating affordability for working families, particularly for our childcare community. And so one of the ways that I'm doing that right now is trying to tie a childcare dependent care tax credit to the vote on the income tax to make sure that if we're going to advance a new income tax, that we're tying it directly to regressive tax relief for working families on their childcare, on a childcare tax credit. So those are examples of ways that I'm fighting to make sure that childcare stays top of mind for folks, because it's really important to me that if we're going to fight for a future that includes everyone, it has to start with our youngest learners.
Great. Thank you so much. And this is just a reminder for everybody tuning in that you're watching a live virtual town hall with Rep. Kristine Reeves from the 30th Legislative District. And you can ask your question live in the comment section. We're now going to go to a question from Martin on immigrants. So Martin says, hi, Rep. Reeves, what is the state doing to protect our immigrant population? I know there's been some bills relating to this. You rock, and thanks for all you do.
Well, thank you so much, Martin Moore, Councilmember Moore. It's nice to hear from you. And I'm sorry I haven't been able to see you because I've been sequestered down in Olympia. And thank you for your leadership and your work in community. A couple things that we are working on in Olympia to protect immigrants and new Americans in our community, which, as you know, we have quite a few in Federal Way in South King County. And what I would say is we're looking at things like requiring ICE to not wear masks when conducting their law enforcement activities, making sure that we are addressing data privacy issues and data leaks at the state level relative to data sharing with the federal government that puts law-abiding citizens at risk. We are focused on, again, making sure that we're addressing healthcare access, food access, housing access, and ultimately asking our federal law enforcement partners to follow state law, whether that's through the Keep Washington Working Act or others. Our job is to make sure that every member of our community feels safe, and that, that we're doing what we can to ensure that they know that they're welcome here and that we're going to take care of them when they're here.
Great. Thank you so much. We're now going to go to another pre-submitted question, and this one is from Betty. And Betty asks, what will go in the lot where Wild Waves is now?
Betty, that's my favorite question so far because I think, like you, I'm really curious. I'm a former economic developer, so I spend a lot of time thinking about how we recruit, retain, expand businesses in South King County. I've been really privileged to get to partner with our local chamber and with other economic development leaders in South King County to focus on what our strengths are as a community relative to industry. And so we now know what the top three most dense industries are here. That helps us look strategically at what kind of businesses we can recruit that are going to find economies of scale here. We also know what work we need to do to build out those businesses. So we know, for example, that it's actually small women-owned businesses that are farthest from opportunity in South King County in Federal Way. And so have been partnering with the Office of Minority Women Business Enterprises, with our Department of Revenue, ESD, and L&I to work to determine how we can do a better job of supporting, small women-owned businesses in their work moving forward. And, ultimately my goal is to partner with the city, who is the chief permitter, and others as they advance a plan for that lot. But like you, I'm going to be curious, and my kids obviously are sad that Wild Waves is leaving, and really appreciate that business's support to our community over the last, couple decades. They've become an institution, and we're going to miss them. So hopefully we'll be able to find somebody up to the task of replacing that lot.
Great. Thank you so much. We're now going to go to a live question from Susan. Susan says, hi, I've heard that the Washington legislature is considering cuts to the state's match of Medicaid funds for adult PT, OT, and speech therapy. Is this true, and what is your stance?
Yeah, Susan, that's a great question, and not one that has been flagged for me. So I'm going to have to do some homework on that and get back to you. I'm sorry I wasn't prepared on that specific topic, but I'm happy to take that down. And if you put your contact information, you can either email my office. There'll be contact at the end of this with that question. I'm happy to follow up. Or if you put your contact in the chat, we can take down your question and do some follow up with you.
Yes, actually, that's a great plug for everybody tuning in. At the end of tonight's event, we'll be putting up Rep. Reeves's contact information. So for any questions that we don't get to, or any additional, follow-up questions that you have, her contact information will be up at the end of tonight's event. We're now going to go to a live question from Stacy. So is there any chance that Consumer Protection will be coming forward with more steps to protect our elderly from predatory corporate landlords?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Stacy, we have done a lot of work in the House on addressing landlords in general, whether predatory or otherwise, over the last couple years, trying to make sure, whether it's through rent stabilization or other things, trying to make sure that our seniors in particular, who I think are living on a fixed income, who are, just doing their darndest to be able to get by, don't fall victim to some of this. I can tell you that the work that I've been doing this session particularly around senior housing. I want to thank, Vivian and Goldie and others from SHAG who've been working with me on this, is trying to get a seniors bill of rights relative to housing into our public policy to make sure that as these folks advertise to seniors specifically, that there are protections. What we've learned is there are senior protections in assisted living and senior care facilities. There's protections under the landlord tenant law under multifamily housing, but seniors who live in these kind of 55 plus or senior independent living facilities or locations are falling through the cracks because there's not actually a definition for them in statute. And so we've been working really hard this session to try to get definition in statute, incorporate a senior living bill of rights, and then tie that to the other protections that we have in statute for seniors. And we're going to keep working at that, Stacey, because you're absolutely right. Our elders deserve every protection from folks who are looking to do them harm. And we've done this in other places on other policies, not just housing, but we're going to keep working at it. And I appreciate you raising it because I'm sure you saw the Seattle Times article like I did. Our seniors are the most vulnerable community right now, experiencing debt and bankruptcy, and particularly around their housing costs. So we've got to do more.
Great. Thank you so much. We're now going to go to another pre-submitted question. And this one is also from Craig. So how do you support our law enforcement, including our federal law enforcement officers who are enforcing federal laws?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Craig. Well, I think, I have a twin brother who was in law enforcement for a while, have worked with a lot of law enforcement folks, particularly veterans exiting the military into law enforcement. It's important to me that, as law enforcement is one of the only obligations that's essentially 100% publicly funded, making sure that, when somebody calls 911 or they are seeking a first responder, that they're going to get that response is really important. Ways that I've worked on addressing that. So when I came back to the legislature, I voted to reinstate police pursuits, which I know is really important to our community. I worked to help further fund the law enforcement retirement effort. We have worked on with the governor, and I know there's some complications to it in its first year, but worked to get $100 million set aside in our budget this last year so local communities could offer bonuses and retention efforts for local law enforcement. And so it's really important to me that we find the right balance, right, to public safety and law enforcement in our communities, because I also know that we're a community that has experienced harm from the over authorization of law enforcement. And so we've got to find the right balance, Craig. I think that balance, as you ask around our law enforcement at the federal level, I will share, I worked for a federal member of Congress, and law enforcement at the federal level has very specific parameters around what they are supposed to be doing, particularly when we start talking about states' rights and their right to execute those laws at the state level. And so what I would say is, as long as federal law enforcement officers are following the law and, informing local law enforcement that they're going to be in their community, engaging in operations that follow state law, then understand the need for them to be in the state and doing their work. But I want to make sure, like others, that they're following the law and doing it in a way that best supports public safety in our community.
Great. Thank you so much. Now we're going to go to another live question. This one from Kuman. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce that. Kuman, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Sarah.
So I'd like to ask about Senate Bill 5814 in regards to live presentations being taxed. Do tutoring centers fall under this category?
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for that question. And I know that we're going to be working with you over email to get a formal ruling from the Department of Revenue. What I can share is that when we passed 5814 last year, we had an understanding of how it should be interpreted by the Department of Revenue relative to live presentations. Over the summer, after we left Olympia, we learned that the Department of Revenue interpreted it differently. And it did catch up a bunch of folks that we were not intending to catch up in that policy, including educators and others. So I know that what you are going to see this year is a couple proposals to fix those unintended consequences from 5814. And so that's why I want to get you in touch with the Department of Revenue to make sure that, one, we know whether or not you are caught up in the requirements under 5814. And if you are, making sure that you may get clearance in the new proposals that we have to try to correct those unintended consequences. So I look forward to working with you on that and appreciate your leadership in our community and the good work you do to provide our students with strong supports and tools to be successful in our K through 12 system.
Great. Thank you so much. Now we're going to go to another live question. This one says, a coalition of Washingtonians requested the DOJ to investigate Tacoma police for use of force abuses, etc. With Washington having a large lobby of Black legislators, why is police reform still unattainable?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I want to preface it by saying we do have a large legislative Black caucus, as I mentioned at the beginning. There are 14 of us, 2 senators and 12 House members. I will say that, like any community, we are not a monolith in our work. But I will say that it is because of Black members in the legislature that we have made as much progress on police accountability and police reform as we have. And it's why I think you see so much of the dialogue, and even to Craig's question around the tension between supporting or not supporting law enforcement, right? And as I mentioned earlier, I can make some assumptions. They may be wrong about your question, but we also have seen law enforcement do harm in community. And it doesn't mean all law enforcement officers, but we want to hold this publicly funded entity accountable when it does do harm in community. And so the work ahead is to make sure that we continue to hold not only law enforcement, but our fellow legislators accountable to that commitment. And the best example that I can give you of that is the work that we did last year on House Bill 2015. When Governor Ferguson came out and said, I want $100 million for cops, and several of us were like, we hear you, Governor, but we're not 100% sure that we've met the outcome goals of de-escalation, police accountability and reform, et cetera. So before you just blanketly give them a check for $100 million, we want to make sure that we're putting sideboards around that to protect our communities in that relationship. And so we are doing the work. It may not be super blatant and super obvious, but the Black Caucus is working hard to hold all of our teammates accountable to reaching these goals around police reform.
Great.
But I'm open to feedback. Like if there's other things, more specific things you want us working on, the Black Caucus does do a legislative agenda. And so we hosted a town hall this last year with over 300 people who attended. Folks contributed kind of problems they wanted to see us solving. And then we sent out a community survey. Folks voted on that. And then we came up with a legislative agenda that focuses on 3 of our top priorities: are protecting Black youth, helping Black and Brown people build generational wealth and sustainability, and then creating some government accountability and systems oversight. So I'm happy to talk offline about what those bills are, where they are in the process, et cetera. But that is one way that we'd love to invite you into the process to help us get to better policy.
Great. Thank you so much. We're now going to go to another live question, this one from Nathan. Nathan asks, with Flock recently changing their terms of service to grant themselves an unlimited and irrevocable license to use data generated from their cameras any way they choose, have they made their service incongruent with Washington state law, specifically the Keep Washington Working Act?
Yeah, that's a great nexus, Nathan, that I hadn't thought about in terms of incongruency with Keep Washington Working. I don't think we've seen that nexus. I think where we are focusing on that nexus, and you'll see there, I think Megan may have to help me, but I think it's Senate Bill 6002. Is that right? The ALPR I think that's the ALPR, which is the automated license plate reader. So when we say Flock, just for everybody else's benefit, Flock is the company name. That they are a company that provides services to cities and counties around automated license plate readers. Those automated license plate readers are supposed to just kind of capture your license plate information if you're speeding, if you're running a red light, things like that. As Nathan highlighted, what we found is that, and we saw this in Auburn, that the Department of Homeland Security has created a partnership with that company and is pulling that data to try to capture or use that data for what we would argue is maybe less than transparent or honest purposes. I think, Nathan, the nexus that I'm looking at is, does that violate our data privacy laws more so than it violates our Keep Washington Working laws? But that bill is coming from the Senate to the House, and so I'll have more information for you as it comes over from the Senate, and it is 6,002. But the goal is to basically say, look, and I've been very clear about this to our community. In fact, the mayor's heard me say this multiple times. The city of Federal Way has asked for money for Flock cameras, and your delegation has straight up told them we would not fund those things with your tax dollars. So some of this is also about how do we hold our local jurisdictions accountable to making sure that they're protecting your data, because really, to me, that it's a data privacy issue, it's a community safety issue. And so how do we do the and both of regulating them at the state level while also getting our local jurisdictions to understand the harm that they're potentially putting our communities in?
Great. Thank you so much. We're about halfway through our event tonight, so this is just a reminder for all those who are tuning in that you're on a live virtual town hall with Rep. Kristine Reeves of the 30th Legislative District. We're now going to go to another live question, this one from Becca. Becca asks, what big picture long-term business sector growth for our district, the growth hub in South King County, do you envision?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Becca. And I think this is Becca Martin from the Chamber. And so appreciate your partnership. As a former economic development director, it's been really great to find a progressive chamber focused on building a strong economy in South King County, and doing that by supporting our small businesses and our locally owned businesses here in South King County. As I mentioned earlier, really proud of the work that we've done to do to really get to data-driven decision making around how we build a stronger economy in South King County, understanding what our strengths are relative to our top 3 industries, how do those align with state industry sectors where we're already driving economic growth, both through private sector investments as well as public sector investments. And, what I'd love to envision, and you've heard me talk about this before, is I've been a big fan and a big advocate of making sure that we partner with the private property owners for the former Weyerhaeuser campus to see if we can't get that to a kind of a center. I'd love to see it be a community resilience center where we're advancing, technology focused on environmental efforts, partnering with, Amazon and Microsoft in the region to build out STEM education for our kids using the prairie there, using the pond and other things. I think it could be a living laboratory and a tech hub that could really focus on advancing the technology of the future. And it's the biggest hurdle is just getting around the cost of upgrading that building, making sure that it meets current environmental standards and other things, and then recruiting folks. We just don't do economic development the way we did in the 80s. And so we've got to be thinking more strategically about how we advance that vision. But I would love to see that, where we're creating kind of a centralized tech center focused on climate resilience and environmental efforts on the Weyerhaeuser campus, so we can protect that as a crown jewel of South King County and what it really started as, while advancing economic opportunity that grows small businesses, brings in new business partners, creates jobs in our community, and gives our kids hope for the future.
Great. Thank you so much. We're now going to go to a pre-submitted question. This one's from Catherine. So What can we as average citizens do to help and protect the immigrants in our communities? How can we support our state and federal representatives to push back against the one big beautiful bill cuts? How do we fund our schools and provide Medicaid to kids in our state? A couple questions all in one, kind of referring to federal action.
Yeah, no, but I take it Catherine is a big thinker. So I think, Catherine, you're asking all the right questions. And I think these are the questions that are challenging the legislature right now. As I mentioned earlier on the call, these would be challenging questions in any budget year. And, back to Craig's point, I do want to acknowledge that I think, like Craig, I have a lot of questions. I came to the legislature in 2017 when we were, expending a $44 billion budget. We just passed an $80 billion budget on Saturday. I think, like Craig, I probably have a lot of questions about how the spending that we are doing is actually accomplishing the goals that you're talking about, Catherine, right? Protecting immigrant communities, supporting our local schools, addressing Medicaid and Medicare. And at the same time, we are challenged because 25% of our state budget relies on federal dollars that you pay to the federal government, and asking that money to come back to the state in a formulary. That federal money pays for things like education, through the IDEA and other things. It helps us support special education. It helps us fund, access to health programs for our youngest learners. And when we talk about things like helping fund SNAP and WIC, right, I think people think that these are just, lazy folks on welfare. But the reality is the 940,000 Washingtonians currently receiving SNAP benefits, which is supplemental nutrition. This is food, right? Access to food. 35% of them are children under the age of 18, right? 36% of them are seniors, and, our elders that we just talked about, and folks experiencing disability. So when I think about the folks that we're trying to protect in our system, this isn't grift for lazy people. This is making sure that we keep our commitment to the people that we say we care about, which is our kids. And how do we make sure we're providing them economic opportunity when they're not allowed to participate in the economic system, right, until they're at least 16, and protecting our elders who've already kind of paid into the system through, a lifelong employment, through other ways, and making sure that we're keeping that promise to them on the back end. I often think about my grandma in this. She devoted her life to service in a hospital, cleaning other people's messes in the hospital. And when she retired, wanting to make sure that she's going to be able to retire with a level of comfort and ease. And I think that's what we owe every Washingtonian, who meets their senior citizen threshold, is how do we make sure that they're now getting to, take some rest and relaxation, and thanks to their commitment for contributing to the economy prior. So we've got a lot of work to do, Catherine. Again, these are not easy questions. They're not easy answers, because we're living in unprecedented times, quite frankly. This is my 7th legislative session, and I'll be honest, I've never seen anything like this in the 7 years that I've been doing this. And so it's forcing us to ask some really hard questions about what we can afford, what we can't afford, who's going to get cut, who's going to lose resources, et cetera. And even with the spending that we've asked for, we've had to cut really important programs to people and to community. And that's a really hard place to be right now.
It is indeed, yes. For those of you tuning in to tonight's live virtual town hall, feel free to submit your question live in the comments. We're now going to go to a couple pre-submitted questions about revenue. So this first one is from Gary. Okay. So why is the proposed state income tax shielded from voter initiatives to rescind or delete it?
Gary, I think that's a great question. I would say I don't think it's shielded from voters' initiative, and we may just be talking about something different. But ultimately, every piece of legislation that we pass, voters have the right to challenge the legislature on anything that we pass. And I fully anticipate that if an income tax is passed this session, that voters will take up the opportunity to challenge the legislature on it and make their voices heard. I've been spending most of this session, though, listening to my community, and you're going to see me offer a list of amendments to the income tax proposal focused on, I'm for progressive tax relief. I understand that the regressive tax system we live in is not working for folks. But if we're going to take, this monumental vote for progressive tax reform, I want to make sure that we are strategically and thoughtfully tying it to regressive tax relief for middle class and working families. So that's why I mentioned earlier, I'm going to offer an amendment focused on, if you're going to submit your income tax, that, offering folks the opportunity to take a childcare and dependent care tax credit, right? Thinking about, I talk to a lot of young folks right now who are really struggling with student loan debt, but are doing public service in our education systems and our childcare systems, and saying, hey, look, to me, that's an investment in the health and well-being of our community. You should get a tax credit for that. Because I think these are the things that working families are looking for in this process. And so that's the fight that I'm going to keep fighting down here, to make sure that we get to progressive tax reform that provides actual and real regressive tax relief.
Great. Thank you. So following up on that, we have a different question, this one from Michelle. So we need new revenue now. Without new progressive revenue, you'll be forced to cut billions from childcare and early learning, as well as healthcare, education, and more. Just like the state, families also have a budget gap. I have 3 kids and childcare is not affordable right now. Will you support new progressive revenue to fix the upside down tax code? Will you ask your leadership to prioritize avoiding cuts to childcare and early learning?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. As I mentioned earlier, I have asked my leadership to prioritize avoiding those cuts, which is how the House budget came out with $40 million more for childcare efforts than the Senate budget did. I know that probably doesn't mean much, but when you get into conference negotiations, that can mean all the difference to how many kids are going to be able to still access childcare. And I agree with you. We need progressive revenue now. I would tell you that, unfortunately, it is my opinion that the progressive revenue that is on the table is not revenue that's going to help us right now. As many of you probably know, the income tax will most likely go to court and has not been booked in our budget until the out years. So even if you're for the income tax isn't going to help us this year. And the work we have, again, moving forward, is this challenge where, and this is what keeps me up at night, is, I'm talking to constituents who are saying, I'm trying to go to school and I'm sleeping in my car because I can't afford housing, right? Or I'm a mom with 3 kids and I'm trying to feed them, but I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And now my benefits are going to get cut. And I'm just trying to work and feed my kids, right? That's what keeps me up at night, is that, how are we making sure that as we try to transition our system to progressive tax reform, that we're actually taking care of you today? Because if you can't survive today, waiting 3 years to get through a court challenge and an initiative doesn't feed your kids. And so some of the work that I've been doing is really looking at things like what places in industry have we not updated fees, licensing, other things, right? That's an existing structure where we could advance, fair and equitable revenue generation tomorrow, right? Assuming we passed a budget tomorrow, that you could kind of turn the faucet on a little bit and make a meaningful difference. And so things like addressing tobacco taxes, alcohol taxes, cannabis taxes, et cetera, that I think, help us try to get to some increased revenue now, recognizing that an income tax, even if we passed it, wouldn't go into effect for several years. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm going to keep fighting the fight, Michelle, because what I understand is that 92% of our kids' brain development happens between 0 and 5. Childcare facilities are the place that our kids are getting early learning opportunities, and that moms like you and I then get the opportunity to put our kids somewhere safe so that we can go to work and try to earn a paycheck to feed our families. We need to make that easier for folks, not harder. And so I'm going to keep fighting to make sure that we're fully funding K through 12 education. We're going to fully fund. I'm trying to get us to fully funding childcare access, because to me, those are the places that help working families work more.
Great. Thank you so much. We're now going to go to a live question from Nathan.
Okay.
So I'd love to see the Weyerhaeuser campus turned into a tech school. Are you keeping an eye on the growth of data centers the last few years and the effects they have on communities they're built in, like water, power, noise, etc.?
Yeah, Nathan, great question. There are a couple data center bills floating through the legislature right now. I would love to get to a place where I could vote for the one that came through the House. Unfortunately, with an amendment that was taken from the Republicans, it would potentially obfuscate our government to government treaty right obligations to our tribes, and so I voted no. But I'm hopeful that they'll get that corrected in the Senate and that we'll be able to bring that back over to the House, and hopefully I'll be able to transition my vote to a yes. But I can't, in good conscience, vote for addressing data centers while marginalizing our tribal obligation to government treaty rights.
Great. Thank you so much. Just as a reminder to everybody, you're watching a live virtual town hall with Rep. Kristine Reeves of the 30th District, and you can submit your question in the comments section. We're now going to go to a question from Vivian. Hello, Rep. Reeves. What needs to be done to move House Bill 2299 regarding the ombuds forward in 2027?
2299.
I
Is
believe
this
this was one of your bills, establishing an independent living ombuds to
the
support
senior
seniors
living
living in
ombuds?
independent living facilities.
Yeah. This is the senior. Sorry, thank you. I friends, I'm a very prolific legislator. I think I have 48 or 49 bills that I've introduced in the last two sessions. So trying to keep track of all the bill numbers is, thank you for putting that in there, because I was like, that number sounds familiar, but I never refer to it by the bill number. So I would tell you that I think my understanding is that will most likely be a Senate vehicle. Senator Bateman has also been working on a senior living ombuds. I can tell you that we ran into some complications in that policy relative to trying to negotiate through some of the needs. And I'm happy to check in with Senator Bateman tomorrow when I get back down to Olympia. But my understanding is that this most likely will be an interim conversation on how we get with the AG and others about how we make sure that actually works the way we want it to work. But I'm committed to continuing to do this work on behalf of seniors, because I think, our elders and others, particularly in housing, need, advanced protections that they're not getting right now.
Great. Thank you so much.
I think that's Vivian Alexander. And so I just do want to add, Vivian, you've been an amazing champion in our community on behalf of seniors and elders. And as I mentioned earlier, you may not have been on, but we've made tremendous progress on trying to get the Senior Bill of Rights passed, trying to get some additional senior protections in housing. And so we're going to keep at it, and just appreciate your leadership, Goldie's leadership, the team's leadership on continuing to fight for, the seniors in our community to make sure that they have the equal protections they deserve under the law.
Great. Well, to kind of follow up on that a bit, there's another live question from Stephen. So,
Okay.
do you think food security for seniors as part of a senior Bill of Rights may also be supported within the strategic plan for food systems? Likewise, supporting food hubs and backpack programs for kids, economic opportunity, and community well-being are closely tied to food access, right?
Yeah, Stephen, that's a great point. I think when we talk about the Senior Bill of Rights, it's been predominantly built around housing rights for that community of folks that fall through the cracks between senior assisted living and multifamily housing protections. So when you're talking about a Senior Bill of Rights, I think you're talking about a much more expansive Bill of Rights, which I would totally be open to championing and advocating for. I think some of the work that we've done this session, we had a farms to food banks bill, we had a farms to schools bill, we have the food security strategy, we have a grocery store covenants bill or grocery store access bill. There was a kind of a plethora of food security bills. And as the chair of the Food Fighters Caucus here in Olympia, what I'd love to do is put this on a list of things that we could come back at in 2027 and list as a top priority for us to try to advance in the 27 session, because I think you're onto something for sure.
Great. Thank you so much. Just a reminder, if you have a question, you could submit it live in the comments section. We're now going to go to a pre-submitted question from Julie. Julie asks, should the state have a law requiring companies to pay out unused earned vacation upon termination? If so, how do we get that rolling?
Yeah, that's a great idea, Julie. I had the privilege of working for the state for a little while, and that's something that we're required to do at the state. That if you've earned vacation time, it gets paid out upon you leaving your employment. So yeah, I like the idea. Hadn't thought about it on the private side, but would love to kind of noodle with you on it offline. One, maybe we are already requiring that, but my sense is by your question that we're probably not, or you wouldn't have asked it. And I'm totally open to dropping a bill that says private sector companies need to pay out vacation. You know, it's part of what you've earned from the company, right?
Indeed, your benefits. All right. So going to go to a couple of other pre-submitted questions. So let's see. This one is, I saw the House transportation budget just passed. Are there any projects that will benefit our district?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I'm ashamed to say I have not taken time to go through the list and actually pull that together. So it's not top of mind for me which of our projects are on that list, but I'm happy. I don't know who asked that question, but I'm happy to try to get that list put together in the next 24 hours or so and respond if somebody wants to drop their email in the chat. Or what I can also commit to is typically after we get to final budget passage, because these are just budgets between the House and the Senate, and they have to get negotiated. So I will typically in my newsletter send out upon final passage of the budgets what actually stayed alive in the budgets. And so I guess what I would commit to is keep your eye out for that newsletter, and you'll get a list of what came out of the capital budget, the transpo budget, and the operating budget that benefits the 30th legislative district. And that'll come out in the next couple weeks.
Great. Thank you so much. We're now going to go to another live question. This one's from Michelle. Potentially something we've already touched on a little bit, but how is the state preparing for the adjustments in SNAP funding?
Yeah, Michelle, that's a great question. So if you're not familiar, what's happened at the federal level is the federal government has under House Resolution 1 or House HR 1, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill, has passed several requirements upon states that require us to change how folks are eligible for SNAP benefits. It's going to cost taxpayers in the state of Washington about $300 to $500 million to implement those requirements, including new data systems to ensure that ESD and other agencies, our data is talking to each other around work requirements and other things. And that's on top of the benefit, right? That's tax dollars going into updating the system to make it comply with the federal government rules. What I would say is, how are we trying to address that? So this gets really wonky, Michelle, but there's things called like an error rate, which, the federal government legislation requires that states above a certain error rate then have to make payments. Basically, like we have to, if we're not complying, we get fined. Basically, Washington has one of the lowest error rates, but we are still above the federally required error rate. So we're doing work to try to, one, bring down that error rate, and two, plan for how to get into compliance as quickly as possible with the federal regulations. That, as I mentioned before, that includes things like making sure that our data systems are talking to each other, that we're able to better track, kind of between the work requirements and others, how people are meeting that. I would also say, like, we're trying to figure out how to fund the gap. USDA has cut a lot of funding to these programs, including to our food banks and our food service systems in childcare centers. And you may not know that USDA is actually who does a lot of that funding, because originally SNAP was designed as a subsidy program that actually supported agriculture. So if you're familiar with kind of the stereotypes about food assistance, it's why people will crack jokes about government cheese or government milk, etc., was because when the program was first designed, it was to provide kind of a stabilizing force to farmers, particularly big commodity farmers, dairies and others, beef growers, etc., to stabilize the instability in the agricultural community. And so by providing this food assistance, our community members go to the same grocery store you and I do, and they just get a discounted rate on the same groceries that we're buying, right? And what's going to happen here is basically, if we don't find the resources to address the 940,000 people who are on SNAP, what's going to happen is they're either going to get less funding, meaning that they're going to have to stretch the funding that they get farther, or we're going to have to just kick folks off SNAP so that the funding that they do get actually can buy, the things that they need to buy. We are working really hard to try to address that gap in the system while complying with HR 1. I would encourage you, Steve Berquist, who's the chair of Early Learning and Human Services, is the lead in our caucus on that work. I'm happy to check in with him to get more details, but that's kind of the preliminary, very 50,000-foot overview of we are working on it. We are working on both compliance for those who support HR 1, while also, figuring out how to provide compassion for those who recognize that what we're being asked to do maybe doesn't align as succinctly with the state's values as we'd like it to. So hopefully that answered your question.
Great. Thank you so much. We're now going to go to a pre-submitted question from Anna. She asked, as chair of Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee, what's the biggest issue you're hearing from farmers or natural resource workers right now?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Anna. I really love getting to chair this committee because, one, growing up in Eastern Washington, in farm country, I grew up in Moses Lake. Lots of folks joke that it's a Starbucks stop to destinations greater. But what I loved about it was, getting to connect on a regular basis with the people who put food in our grocery stores. Or provide the food that feeds the cows that put food in our grocery stores, right? And so what I'm hearing from farmers right now is, tariffs at the federal level have really hurt them. And those tariffs have trickled down to our state level challenges around how we best, and it's not hurt all of them, right? I want to be transparent, some of the farmers have benefited from those tariffs. But what I can also tell you in full honesty and transparency is that they are worried that some of the work that we've done in Olympia creates some burdens that haven't been funded for them, things that have added requirements. And so, the work that we're trying to do is to right size those. As I tell folks, no public policy is ever perfect, and citizen legislatures don't always get it right. Let's just be honest about that. And so the work that I'm trying to lead as the chair of the committee is, how do we meet farmers where they are in recognizing that for them, this is a lived experience, this is a real experience, and making sure that we're fighting for their sustainability, because when they can't be sustainable, they can't feed us. And when they can't feed us, groceries get more expensive. We have less food in food banks. We have less food at farmers markets. And it just makes food universally more expensive for everybody, or harder to access for everybody. So we're actually going to hear a farm bill this week, a state farm bill. And my commitment to the farmers and to the food banks and others is that, it's really in our best interest to partner with each other. And we really got to see that partnership this year on the food security strategy and some of the other food security bills. And so we're going to keep working to enhance that partnership, so that we can get to a statewide food security strategy that keeps farmers viable, puts food in the grocery store that's more cost effective for working families, and that gets to putting fresh food and vegetables into farmers markets, food banks, etc., so that folks are accessing healthy meals as well. And that's going to include things like childcare centers and public schools. So things like, how do we bring down the cost of transporting an apple from Yakima to Tacoma so that it can be in your kid's school lunch, when it's actually cheaper right now to transport that apple from Yakima to California, right? We've got to figure out how to address that. And that's the work that we're doing in the committee, and the work that I'm committed to continuing as we move forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Rep. Reeves. We are getting towards the end of our event tonight. I wanted to throw up one last comment just so that you see it. Julie says, thank you, Rep. Reeves, for working to improve the quality of life for Washingtonians. I appreciate thoughtful decisions in the space of many, many constraints.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate that.
So that was our last question of the evening, everybody. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I'm now going to turn it back over to Representative Reeves for some closing remarks. Rep. Reeves, would you like to begin?
Thanks so much, Megan. And thanks to everybody who came out tonight. I know that it's not perfect, and I know that, we're working really hard to get it right for everybody. But as I often tell folks, just like Black people are not a monolith, Democrats are not a monolith, our community is not a monolith. And my commitment to our community is to continue to listen, to learn, to keep an open door and an open mind, recognizing that I'm never going to be able to make everybody happy, but my goal is to do the work to fight for a future that includes us all. And as we do that work, I'm going to continue showing up in community. If you're not familiar, I do weekly coffee hours. I do 2 hours at a local coffee shop in Federal Way, unincorporated King County, but between over at the former Weyerhaeuser campus. That is open, free, and open to the public. You can come every Tuesday. Keep an eye on my Facebook page just in case I have to cancel for floor votes, which I won't be there tomorrow because we're doing floor votes really early. But and then I do digital office hours or virtual office hours on Fridays during the interim. And then, of course, if you see me in the grocery store, at my kids' ballet, my son's baseball, or just out and about in community, don't hesitate to just snag me, say hi, let me know, what's working for you, what's not working for you. I do take all of that very seriously. And I really do spend a lot of time trying to figure out how we get to supporting the majority of people who live in our community and doing it in a way that is transparent and equitable. So thank you guys for showing up today. Thanks for continuing to communicate what matters most to you. And even if we don't always agree, just know that I really appreciate, for those of you, I have been watching the comments, for those of you frustrated with the budget challenges, frustrated with the spending, frustrated with taxes, I hear you. And I will share that those comments don't go unnoticed or unconsidered. And I'm working hard to try to dig deep on those and figure out how to better answer your questions. So thank you for bringing them forward.
Thank you so much. So that's all the time we have this evening. Thank you so much for attending and for submitting questions. If we did not get to your question, you can directly contact Rep. Reeves' office with your comments and questions. Her contact information will be on the screen shortly. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening.